Welcome back to the 17th episode of the Dear Young Men podcast. In today's episode, we're going to go over red pill content. I just sort of learned what that is recently, and I want to talk a little bit about it. Choosing between yourself and your responsibilities as a guy, and learning to bear a heavier load on Dear Young Men. Obviously, today is an audio-only podcast. If you're listening to it, then it doesn't affect you. If you typically watch this, well, then you're just not watching, you're just listening. My basement, if you know, you heard last week's episode, my basement flooded pretty dramatically, and I'm still dealing with the ramifications of that. I've been extremely busy, pretty much working on that 2-3 hours every single night after work, and it's just been a lot. So that's why you get an audio-only podcast. But I still want to make it because I do enjoy making these, and I think that hopefully they provide some value to some people. Sometimes, maybe. And if not, then I'm just talking to myself, and that's also fine too, because I'm a great listener, and I'm always right too, which is pretty incredible. Before we get started, I want to ask if you like this podcast, give it a 5-star rating, give it a whatever. I also have a YouTube channel if you want to subscribe to that, called the Dear Young Men podcast. It's just my face. So let's get right into it, starting with the red pill movement. What exactly is it? I just kind of found out what red pilling is. I'm not like a big meme guy or big into anything, so I had to look up what it is, and I want to see, I sort of feel like maybe I'm falling into the red pill creator vortex. I want to see, am I part of that? So what I decided to do is I decided to look it up on Reddit, and I also decided to look up what being red pilled is on ChatGPT, because that's what AI is for. AI is here to tell me what red pill content is all about. Let's see, from Reddit we have a little bit of an overview about what it is. The term comes from The Matrix. The claim is that you've finally seen reality work. You've gone off the red pill. You've gone onto the red pill. So obviously in The Matrix, I've never actually seen that movie, but Neo, the main character, is given a choice between the red pill and finding out the truth and the blue pill and just staying fat and happy and being plugged back into the Matrix. These ideas usually include thinking of men and women as fundamentally different and some major generalizations about each, categorizing men into alphas, betas, and omegas, strong and rich and powerful and appealing, submissive and unappealing, not even noticeable, stating that all women want to date alphas. So this is, I think, big misunderstanding. Men have gotten into this, they've become hyper masculine. I think that's where a lot of this red pill stuff comes from, is they become hyper masculine in a way where they're not living into a true masculinity, the Jesus version of masculinity, the way that we're supposed to live. They've taken sort of all the worst parts about being a man, not the worst parts, but some of them, it's not the worst parts, it's the most aggressive parts about being a man. They turned it up to 12. So wanting to sleep around as much as possible, trying to become high status, being rich, being wealthy, having material wealth, having these things. And obviously, the Bible a million times over explains why all of that is wrong. But we'll go into that in a little bit deeper detail. Going back to Reddit, some criticisms: it ignores, dismisses women who aren't conventionally attractive, encourages unhealthy behavior in men, controlling, aggressive thinking of women as a prize to be won, denying men's emotions that aren't manly enough, all or nothing mentality about being alphas or not, being controlling and aggressive. I think that's a little bit of a misunderstanding about Ephesians 5, and we'll go over that a little bit. Think about a woman as a prize to be won. I think that that's okay so long as continue to treat her as though she's the prize that you won, not treating it as like, oh, this is just another notch in my belt, I'm going to go get another notch tomorrow night. Denying men's emotions that aren't manly enough. As a guy, you are sometimes called to not have emotions, unfortunately. As a father and as a husband, you're called to sort of bear the weight of your entire family's problems. At the end of the day, they need to look to somebody to show them the way and say that everything's going to be okay. If you're also there completely stressed out and you're really frustrated and you're doing this and you're responding poorly, then yeah, unfortunately, like, you are sort of called sometimes to not be quote unquote emotional. Obviously men have emotions, but in some cases it's just like when my basement was flooded this last week, it was stressful and my wife was getting really stressed out, and I just had to be the person that wasn't stressed out and wasn't upset and wasn't this and wasn't that, because somebody had to be that person, because if not, then we would have been spinning our tires, not doing anything. And so sometimes you are just called to not have emotions, and that's life. Going back to it, firm gender roles, the alpha breadwinner and the trophy feminine woman. Women who are red-pilled are sometimes heavily into chivalry. The guy pays, women should be treasured, and men are there to serve. I don't understand how that's a criticism, really. I mean, that sounds pretty good for women, at least. I mean, like, that sounds pretty good. And then going back to it, says, I'm sure I've left some stuff out of both lists. It tends to overlap with pickup artists, but isn't identical. Someone being red-pilled is often commenting that they've dramatically changed their worldview and believe in gender essentialism. Ideal men, ideal women, both straight men win women by being manly enough. Men only want sex and women only want love. So I think from what I'm understanding from this, and it definitely is coming from somebody who doesn't like the idea of a red pill person, and that's fine, because they give criticism but don't get like, oh, maybe some positives of it either, which is fine. I want to argue a little bit about it. I think I mentioned earlier Ephesians 5. I think a lot of people misunderstand that and they misconstrue what's in that. So they take it to its furthest extreme, and that extreme is a negative extreme because they have a misunderstanding, because they haven't read the texts, and that's obviously one of the most important parts about being, I think, a human, is to just actually read the Bible, because most of the misconceptions that you might have about something can be cleared up quite quickly within just reading the Bible. So going to Ephesians 5:22 through 33, wives, understand and support your husbands in ways that show your support for Christ. The husband provides leadership to his wife the way Christ does to his church, not by domineering, but by cherishing. And remember, obviously, Christ dies for the church and for us. So that's the level of sacrifice that you're called to make as a husband. So just as the church submits to Christ as he exercises such leadership, wives should likewise submit to their husbands. That right there, those last few words in that sentence are what get everybody up in our arms. Wives should likewise submit to their husbands. But if we continue reading, we'll understand how this sort of makes sense. Husbands, go all out in your love for your wives, exactly as Christ did for the church. Remember, Christ died on a cross after getting whipped and beaten for the church and for us. So, you start to read it and say, okay, well, wives are submitting to their husbands, but then husbands, go all out in your love for your wives, exactly as Christ did for the church. That right there is a call to action for the men to live and emulate Christ as best they possibly can. A love marked by giving, not by getting. Sacrifice, 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 sacrifice. We talk about that all the time in the podcast, but basically, obviously, you're constantly called to sacrifice. My wife has the better car than I do. I am not loving by getting things like, oh, I got the nice car, or I have the nice this, I get that. We never do anything even either. If my wife gets something expensive, then she gets something expensive. It's never, oh, well, I spent $500, so she gets to spend $500, or she spends $500, I get to spend $500. That's not how it is. A love marked by giving, not by getting, not by receiving. It's about giving and sacrificing. Christ gives it all for us and for our sins. And as husbands, you're called to do the same thing. Christ's love makes the church whole. His words evoke her beauty. Everything he does and says is designed to bring the best out of her, dressing her in dazzling white silk, radiant with holiness. And that is how husbands ought to love their wives. They're really doing themselves a favor, since they're already one in marriage. No one abuses his own body, does he? No, he feeds and pampers it. That is how Christ treats us, the church, since we are part of his body. And this is why a man leaves father and mother and cherishes his wife. So obviously a lot of this is just talking about how much husbands ought to treat their wives as basically better than them. No longer two, they become one flesh. This is a huge mystery, and I don't pretend to understand it all. What is clearest to me is the way Christ treats the church, and this provides a good picture of how each husband is to treat his wife, loving himself and loving her, and how each wife is to honor her husband, loving himself in loving her. By loving her and treating her as somebody basically greater than himself, trying to put her up on a pedestal and hold her up there the best he possibly can. That is loving himself. And obviously you are called to love yourself, love your enemies as you love yourself. That's a very common theme throughout Christianity. And another thing I want to note too about women and men is there's this idea that I think this red pill content, I understand it to a point, and it's basically just men collecting notches on their belt as best they possibly can. One thing I will say is that when God came into the world as Jesus, he needed a woman to do that. So it'd be best to treat women the way that God treated women and that we're told to treat women, because it's pretty surprising treating women poorly, calling them names, looking at them as only objects and bodies. That is an unfortunate way to live, in a way it's going to lead you to a significant amount of misery in your life. and a level of unhappiness that I think you won't understand until you get a little bit older. So going back to Reddit, they said, I would avoid anything that uses the term red pill if I were you. They take advantage of young men and have very unhealthy view of the world, alpha bro type stuff, wealth determines your worth, misogyny, etc. Again, I can't really speak to tons of this, but the alpha bro type stuff, again, there's always some positives to it. Working out, taking care of your body, eating healthier, wealth determines your worth. That's obviously not true. I mean, that's not true. It's easier for a rich man to fit through the eye of a needle than for him to get into heaven. So that wealth is material wealth on earth can sometimes be a good thing. I'm not saying don't get rich, but determining your worth based off how much money you have is pretty stupid and pretty silly, because I've said this before, but you can take everything I have. So long as I have my wife and kids, I kind of don't care. So then I asked ChatGPT, and it was pretty much the same thing. They pretty much said the same thing. Awakening to gender roles. This term refers to the idea that women always seek to marry up. Critique of modern relationships, self-improvement, and the game. Some members promote self-improvement through fitness, financial responsibility, and social skills. This right here is where I feel like maybe I fall into the red pill content creator in a way. Fitness, financial responsibility, and social skills. I guess social skills, not really. I don't really have the best social skills. That's why I'm talking. That's why I'm on a podcast. That's why I make podcasts, because I don't have to talk to somebody else. I make a podcast where I don't interview people, and not because I'm too disorganized where I couldn't line up an interview correctly. That's not the reason. It's because I have bad social skills. But no, of course, like improving your fitness and health, it's just good for long term, makes you feel good. And financial responsibility, I can't understand how that could be considered a bad thing. But that's a positive, obviously, to be financially responsible. Controversy and criticism, extremism and toxicity. The Red Pill movement has faced criticism for fostering misogyny, toxic masculinity, and extremist views. This word toxic masculinity is kind of a weird one, because masculinity is good. We are trying to live into the masculinity that Jesus gives us, but taking it too far to the extreme, I guess, can be okay. Like, that's an okay way to say it, toxic masculinity. But that means that all masculinity is toxic. Like, that sort of implies that all masculinity can be toxic. And that's not true, because I can prove it to you. Some members may devolve into anti-women rhetoric, harassment, or aggressive discourse. Again, like, I don't understand. Like, that stuff doesn't really make any sense to me. I'm not saying that they don't do it. I'm just saying I don't know why people do that. I think women have set themselves up. Some women have set themselves up in a way where they are treated by men, and they only are searching out the men who treat them the way that a red pill content creator would treat them. And that's too bad, because they could live a much better life if they were just to find somebody that was a little bit more godly, that was trying to emulate Christ. Misinterpretation of feminism. Critics argue that many of the red pill community misunderstand or misrepresent feminist goals and principles, leading to false dichotomies between men and women. Mental health concerns. Some professionals have voiced concerns about the impact of these beliefs on mental health, particularly as feelings of alienation and resentment can be exacerbated by engaging with toxic ideologies. Yeah, I mean, I think men are uniquely put into a position where they, in the culture now, I do feel like men are kind of alienated in a way, and it's easy for men to get alienated. As a guy, I could see myself, if I didn't have a family, I could see myself just not talking to anybody ever, because you just go to work, you come home, you work out, and you go to sleep, and I could see myself doing that pretty easily. Like, I could see how that could happen to me, which is why I need a family so desperately. That's why I love my family, and one of the reasons I love my family so much is because they make me a better version of myself, and I know that if I didn't have a family, I could never live into the fullest version of myself that I'm supposed to live into, that God has planned for me, because I could see myself just not being, I could see myself being pretty unhappy. All right, next I want to talk about learning to bear a heavier load. I've talked about this a lot on this podcast. It's a pretty cathartic thing to do, is to just sort of talk about me, because it's not that I don't ever talk about me, but in my life. But it's just kind of fun to talk about me to strangers. It's got a little cathartic in a way. And so back and forth, I've been going back and forth a lot on Techno Eclipse. I said I was done making videos on Techno Eclipse. Techno Eclipse, if you don't know, is a tech channel that I said I was sort of done with, because I have felt as though spending time on that was wrong for a number of reasons. And the main one was that I don't want to promote an ideology that I don't believe in. And I'm worried about doing that on the tech channel, where if I review these products and I talk about these things, then maybe I'm promoting an idea, a materialist worldview, which I'm trying to avoid. And I've been going back and forth a lot about it. And so what I decided to do is I'm going to be done, and I'm just going to put all my energy into my other channel, Scott Schroeder, as my main channel. That's what I would consider my main channel. After doing that for a while, though, I realized that what I'm doing is uniquely selfish, because while Scott Schroeder is a ton of fun to make and more fun to make, and probably is closer to my ideals, I'm also making this podcast too. And I have put a lot of time into Technoid Clips in my life. I've been making videos on that channel for 7 years now, almost to the day. And I realized that when I come downstairs to edit a video and to make a video, I'm making a decision every time. When I make a video for this podcast, or I make it for Scott Schroeder, or I'm making it for Technoid Clips, I realize that I'm spending so much time on these away from my family, away from my kids. And it's unfair to them it's not fair for me to do that, because I'm making a decision. I'm selfishly making a decision. You have to, as a guy, you have to learn to choose between yourself and your responsibilities. And I love making videos, and I'm going to make videos regardless of anything. So if I make $10 a month on Scott Schroeder, or I could make $1,000 a month on Technoid Clips, it's selfish of me to come down here and not make Technoid Clips videos, because I spend so much time doing it, and I spend time away from them doing it. So I decided basically is that I'm going to start making them again, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it, because I'm not doing anything wrong. I put my ideas into there, and I'm very against, I'm always telling people to downgrade their phone, to buy older, to buy cheaper, to understand that the phones are just tools, and to not use them as your only source of entertainment. Obviously not to do anything like that. But it's tough. It's very tough, because I like making the Scott Schroeder videos more, but I like making the Technoid Clips videos, just not as much as the Scott Schroeder videos. And so I'm just making the choice. I'm making the choice to be basically a better father, in my opinion. And that's like all I'm trying to do. That's my whole goal, is to be a better father and a better husband. I'm just trying to make those decisions and to make the best decisions that I can. And I realized that if I'm going to spend this much time doing it, and I have this opportunity in my left hand, maybe this is like the red pill, blue pill. I could do the red pill and make more money doing something that I really like doing. Is it exactly what I would choose to do? No. But do I really like doing it? Yes, certainly. Or I could take the blue pill, and if I take the blue pill, it'd be the Scott Schroeder pill, and I would be doing the thing that I like to do the most, but there's no real progress from it, and there's nothing. It's hard when you have this thing that you know works, and then you're going, no, I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do this thing that doesn't work, and maybe it will work in 2 years, but that's 2 years of time away from my kids that I could have just spent with them, as opposed to if I were to do Technoid Clips and I were to make $1,000 a month. That's like a real thing. That's real money that can actually positively impact their lives. I could put that towards their college education. I could put that towards an investment account for them, whatever it is. And if I could spend a little bit more time with them because of that money, let's say I was able to make enough money where my wife didn't have to work, or let's say I was able to make enough money where we could do something that they really love doing more often, as opposed to sacrificing more and more and more, like not doing certain things because we can't afford it. If that's what those opportunities could open up for them, then I'm selfish by not choosing it. And I like making Technoid Clips videos. I don't like it as much as I like making Scott Schroeder videos, but I'd be lying if I said I don't enjoy making a Technoid Clips video. So it's hard though. Like, I'm choosing between myself and my responsibilities, and I'm trying to thread the needle. And right now, to me, threading the needle seems like doing Technoid Clips, because I love making the videos. I really do enjoy doing it, but also I have responsibilities as a guy, and I need to be there for my family as much as I possibly can. And if I'm just going to be doing something that's kind of just a waste of time, I can't spend as much time doing it. And so if I'm going to, and I want to continue to spend as much time as I do doing it, because I do really enjoy it. So I'm just trying to thread the needle of, okay, well, if I'm going to spend this much time away from them, I'm going to at least make money, so that way they get something out of it, more than just me doing something only for myself. And that's a decision I'm making, and it's hard, and maybe I'll look back and regret it, but it's something that I'm just trying to make the right decision, basically, for my family, and for my kids, and for my wife. I'm trying to be a good man, and it's really hard to do that, because it takes a lot of sacrifice. And I might look back and think, you know what, that was dumb of me. I shouldn't have done that. I should have just stopped making videos altogether. And maybe that's what I'll think. But in the time being, it seems to make the most sense to me, so I'm going back to it. Obviously, I'll flip-flop again in probably 6 months or whatever, so maybe even 2 months. So stay tuned to that if I'm still making these episodes, these podcast episodes. Although I will say, something that I found very, very interesting was this last week on Apple Podcast, it seems like a few more people were actually listening. The podcast analytics are a little confusing to me, I'm not going to lie, but I think it's kind of fun to do a little bit of a analytics, I don't know, not a deep dive, but just sort of like where we're at in terms of the analytics on everything. And on Apple Podcast, check this out. I got the analytics pulled up here. We have 6 followers. What? 22 listeners. What? And 306 plays. That's insane. So to the new people that are listening, thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate Obviously, I really appreciate you listening. So thank you for listening, and hopefully we can continue this trend of growth. I'm up 4,171% over the last 60 days. That's nuts. And then on Spotify, I think I have like 175 or so views or listens, which is really cool. So I'm very appreciative of everybody listening. And it seems like the podcast might be growing, which is good. Hopefully it's helping somebody. And if not, then tell me to stop and I'll stop. I can spend more time with my kids or something. All right. So yeah, that's the thing. I've been waffling back and forth between choosing myself and my responsibilities. And it's really hard. And I think I'm making the right decision, but again, I won't know until I do it for a while. All right, so next is the comment section, and unfortunately, we don't have any comments for today, which is okay. We actually did have a few comments in the comment section. We got a few comments left on the last podcast, but it was just people being nice and feeling sorry for me. Kenji, that's tough, man. I'm sorry that something like that happened. And then Tom, my friend, will you make a basement renovation repair video? No, I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to film something. I don't even like doing it. I don't like fixing it. I hate doing this stuff. I just know I have to because we can't afford basically to do it any other way. So I had to do it myself. And I'm not going to add filming on top of that because I hate doing it. Okay. Next is the quote of the day. And the quote of the day is from a book that I read. Well, I listened to it. But I'm going to say I read it to make me sound a little bit more sophisticated. I read this about a month ago, and the quote is, "Practice isn't the thing you do once you're good. It's the thing you do that makes you good." This is by Malcolm Gladwell from his book Outliers. And I think this is just to me, this is just so appropriate to everything that's been happening in my life. If I want to get good at making videos or at podcasting, you just have to practice. No podcast has ever done really well in the first 50 episodes. It just doesn't happen unless it has a backing already from somebody who's uniquely famous or uniquely popular already. That's the only reason that would happen. But as somebody who's pretty much a no-name guy like myself, I need to practice more and more and more. And I know that there are things in each episode that I want to change, that I want to get better at, and I'm trying to improve. Same thing with practicing your response to a negative event. If every time something bad happens in your life, your first instinct is to complain, to bitch, to moan, to find somebody to talk to about it, and to just sit there and feel sorry for yourself, well then that's a thing that you're going to do every single time. And if you're constantly practicing this negative response to everything, all you're going to do is get really good at giving a negative response to everything that you possibly could do, and that happens to you. So I think that for me, the basement flooded, and look, it's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating. It's been a lot of work to fix it, but I'm still here. I'm still standing. That's like a song, I think. I'm sorry for singing. I'm not a good singer, but like, at the end of the day, I'm still fine. I still have my legs. I'm still walking around. There are worse things that could have happened to me, and I'm still my family. So it's just like your response to things. If you constantly are giving a negative response to it, that's all you ever get. But if you practice a positive response, you'll start to have a positive response, and you'll be good at giving a positive response to something. Same thing with any sport. I've talked about how I used to be really good at golf. I mean, I'm still probably pretty good compared to the average Joe, but I don't really play anymore. If you want to get really good at something, it just takes a ton of time. That's pretty much it. There are some other factors that might be able to give you that time, such as if you want to be really good at golf, having parents that can afford to allow you to play a ton of golf. Obviously, kids who had richer parents than mine were able to play more golf, and kids who had parents that were poorer than mine weren't able to play as much golf as me. And so it's just so much of it is just opportunities and events that happen in your life and taking advantage of them. But it's being ready for those moments of greatness. And that's what I feel like with Techno Eclipse is I've been practicing making videos for 7 years. And finally that channel is taking off. I posted a video the other day that's already got 10,000 views, which is crazy for me, for the things that I make. But it's taken me 7 years to get to a point where I can make a video that is demanding and deserving of 10,000 views. But how many people would make videos for 7 years just to do that? Almost none, right? So it just, practice is wildly important, and getting good at practicing and suffering and failing and then practicing again and picking it up again is the most important skill in life. If you want to do anything, you have to, the only skill you need to learn in life basically is learn to get up after you get knocked down. When you play golf and you play like crap, even though you've been practicing a lot, all you have to do is just go back the next day and practice some more, and just understand the progress will come, and constantly look to improve. But you just have to get up and go. You have to get up and go. And then from there, yeah, obviously after you learn to get up and go, you dust yourself up off enough times, then you just learn to get a little bit better at the thing and figure out why you're bad at it. But the only way you'll ever do that is by actually getting up and doing that thing. And I think that it's a really hard skill to learn, because it's a lot easier just to sit there and complain and say that, you know, life is harder for me because my parents weren't this and I'm this, and you know, if I was 6'2", my life would be easier. Well, yeah, maybe it would be, but you're not. So deal with the card that you were dealt and just practice and get good at something. I think the same thing with being a parent is, if you want to be a good parent, every day you have to show up and practice to be a better parent. I think it gets a little bit easier. You have to show up every single day, and that's what it is. Practice is the thing that makes you good. It's not the thing you do once you're good. You don't just start being a good parent once you're a good parent. It's you make every mistake in the book, and then you learn, and then you get better, and you show up every day saying, I'm going to be the best parent that I can possibly be. All right, so next is the unsolicited advice section. My unsolicited advice has a lot to do with what I've been going through in my life personally with my basement flooding and dealing with all the renovations. Sometimes the weight of life can be overwhelming, but you must endure it. Life is really hard. My last podcast episode was titled Episode 16, Life is Hard. I think that's all I title it, or Life is Really Hard. That's what I title it. Life is really hard. That's what I titled it. And I think that as a person and as a guy, this is dear young men, I guess. I'm speaking to the boys now. You are called to bear an immense amount of weight, and you will never get the thanks that you feel like you deserve for that. But you have to just learn to endure through that struggle and through that weight and through that pain of everything, because the weight can feel overwhelming, and it isn't overwhelming though. And I think that it's like things will happen outside of your control that will add on to it, that will pile on. It's like, imagine you're carrying you got like a bucket in your back, and life is just constantly dropping in 50-pound weights here, 10-pound weights there. You know, the 10-pound weight is, oh, you got hurt, and a 50-pound weight is, oh, your basement flooded, and a 100-pound weight is somebody really close to you passed away. These things, I think, life will throw as much as much as it possibly can at you, but you have to learn to endure through that weight and get stronger through it, because I think the weight of life can be overwhelming sometimes. And I want to end with a little Bible verse to get you through, because of course, obviously, Christians going to plug my religion on you as much as I possibly can. This is from 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. God will never put a weight on your shoulders that he knows you can't endure. So just understand that in the hardest moments, and you know what? It is so hard to understand that and to remember that and to think about that in those moments. I mean, it's easy for me to say right now on a podcast, and everything's going pretty well right now. It seems everything's recording pretty well. I don't even have to worry about the lighting or anything. But you have to understand that no matter the weight that you're bearing and how heavy and how crippling it might feel, just understand that you can bear the weight, because if you couldn't bear the weight, it wouldn't be on your shoulders. And that's a lot harder to remember in the moment than right now when things seem pretty good. So just understand that no matter how hard life is and how much weight you feel like is on your shoulders, God knows that you can endure that pain and that weight. So just smile through it, because tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow might be worse, actually, and then it might be worse again. But eventually, that weight will start to lighten. You'll get stronger. It's like we're going to the gym. If you are constantly increasing the amount of weight that you do, you constantly get stronger. And pretty soon, that weight that's on your shoulders is going to feel pretty light, even though that weight is hasn't changed. In fact, maybe it's gotten heavier, but it feels lighter because you know that you can endure it. So thank you for watching or listening. I'm not watching. I guess you're only listening to this episode. Thank you for listening. This has been Scott with the Dear Young Men podcast, episode 17. I will talk to you next week on episode 18. Hopefully I'm done with my stupid basement renovation. And if not, you will be the first to hear about it. All right, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.